All right, I think we'll get started. So welcome everyone to tonight's webinar on staying connected during social distancing. My name's Dr. Renee Beaumont and I'm going to be co-hosting tonight's webinar with Dr. Lauren Hoffman. Just a few housekeeping matters before we get started. If you did want to submit questions during the webinar, we just ask you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if we have time at the end, we'll certainly do our best to answer those. And also there'll be a very brief questionnaire that we ask you to complete at the end of the webinar. You'll be forwarded a link. So if you can fill that out to give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate it. All right, so let's get started. And I think it helps to set the scene by thinking about why social connection is important. So as we're all probably aware, it's a basic human need. We need to feel connected with others. It helps to boost self-esteem and help us to feel good about ourselves. And importantly, also helps us to feel less lonely and isolated, particularly during current times. Staying socially connected also can help prevent or reduce anxiety and low mood, and to manage our other emotions. So talking to someone else, sharing how we feel, can really help us to put things in perspective when it feels like everything's too much and we can't continue or we're feeling overwhelmed. Being connected to others is also really important for maintaining and nurturing friendships and relationships. So while it can be tempting during these times of social distancing to maybe not make the effort to pick up the phone and call someone or message them or do a FaceTime video chat, what you're likely to find is without making that effort to stay connected with people, that it's much harder to reconnect with them once the crisis of the COVID peak passes. And, you know, friendships, relationships are likely to be strained if there isn't some effort to maintain these relationships, during this time. Also, reaching out to others isn't just helpful for us, it also shows that we care for others. And often one of the ways we can feel good about ourselves is offering to help and support other people. In addition to obviously accessing the help we need. So if we think about why it's really important for us to stay socially connected right now, I mean, I think for all of us, these are unprecedented times. We've never faced a situation like the COVID situation has presented us. It's a time of many unanswered questions and uncertainty. When will life return to normal? What will that new normal look like? I think many of us have faced disappointments, missed events, missed opportunities to celebrate or connect with others, and dealing with those emotions can be really hard. And it's hard to know, well, when are we going to be able to hang out with people in a way that kind of resembles like what we used to do before this hit? We're spending more time alone. And it's really easy to get into the routine of just kind of doing your own thing, not reaching out to others and isolating. But it is really important for us to share our concerns with others and to access support from them. As I mentioned earlier, to put things in perspective, to help us to move forward and achieve our own goals as well as supporting others to achieve theirs. And, something I think we probably don't think about so much that's important is if we withdraw too much during this time, it's going to be really hard and awkward to reconnect socially with people once this COVID situation passes. Conversations are going to feel really unnatural and clunky, particularly if you've had friendships and relationships where you've disengaged for a period of time. And I know some of my own friends have commented that, they feel like during this time they've got an insight into who their real friends or close friends are because they're the people who've made the effort to reach out, check how they're doing, and stay connected during this time. Even though at times it can feel exhausting, you can feel like you don't want to do it, it can feel odd, it can feel boring because people don't have exciting stories to share about what they've been doing. So, it can be really seen as a sign of caring for others and a sign of being a good friend or whatever your relationship might be with someone by making the effort despite some of those barriers, which Dr. Hoffman will talk about in a little bit more detail later as well. All right. So how much social contact do we need? This is a question I often get, and I think we can all appreciate there's no one size fits all answer to this. And I think the Simpsons cartoon captures this concept beautifully. Some of us are very extroverted. We love connecting with people. We love socializing. And so the adjustment to the current COVID times for people who are very extroverted may have been a much bigger one than for those who are more introverted and who kind of enjoy their alone time, don't need as much social contact. So as a general guideline, though, most people need to connect with someone at least once a day in terms of maintaining their sense of connectedness, reducing loneliness, and sustaining friendships and relationships.
So it's hard to feel connected right now and there's lots of reasons for that. One, I'm hearing some people feel like there's less to talk about with their friends. We're all doing less each day. So conversations can be, how's your quarantine? Boring. How's yours? What'd you do today? Didn't leave my house. What'd you do today? Didn't leave my house either. And we can get in our heads and think our lives aren't interesting or exciting and forget that our friends' lives are the same. And really, we just want to connect with each other. We don't have to be entertaining. Connecting virtually also may not feel as reinforcing as connecting in person. It's not the same as being face-to-face, being able to give someone a hug or play basketball in the park. It doesn't feel as good as it used to. And we have to acknowledge that and not try to pretend like a FaceTime call is exactly the same. But also remember that it probably feels better than not connecting at all. It also may feel awkward at first. We're not used to FaceTiming or catching up over Zoom. There are awkward pauses. You don't know where to look. You might be focused on what your own hair looks like, and it can feel awkward. So we'd have to just remember that that's okay. That passes. We will get used to it. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. It's hard if you're working or in school all day long, looking at a screen on a computer, and sometimes you might need a break from that. And also, everyone's impacted differently by COVID-19. So it may be hard to feel connected if we're finding it hard to support friends who are having a tough time, or we may be having a tough time and have a hard time asking others for support. And sometimes we might see our friends practicing social distancing differently than we are. So maybe your friends are having a picnic in the park and that's not something that you or your family feel comfortable doing right now. So that can be tough as well. How do we manage that? Other things get in the way as well. So you might have worries, or we call these mind reading thoughts sometimes, thinking you know what other people are thinking about you or judging you. They think I'm weird, I'm gonna say something weird, or they think I'm awkward, making negative predictions or fortune telling, jumping to conclusions. So thinking that they probably don't wanna talk to me anyways, it's not gonna be fun, Zoom is annoying, those kinds of things. We can get in our own way. I think a lot of people are struggling with low energy right now. We're moving less, we're out and about less, so that can be a hard thing to overcome. As well as a lot of people are home with their families, and so it can be hard to find privacy or space away from your family to connect with your friends. So what happens is we can get stuck. Is there a slide missing? We can get stuck in this cycle of, that's okay, go back to the other one, Skylar, sorry. Sorry about that, thank you. So we can get stuck in this cycle of not really doing much, then feeling lonely or sad, then feeling like we're not really in the mood to do much, then we feel even worse, and so on and so forth. So when we feel kind of sad or down, we can feel bored, tired, so we don't go for the things that usually make us feel good. We might put off making that phone call or ignore the text from a friend because we just don't really feel like it in the moment. And unfortunately, that just leaves us feeling isolated, which then makes us feel worse the next day, and the cycle continues. So this can be dangerous, not only because it can end up impacting our mood in a negative way, but we also end up feeling really disconnected and isolated. So we have to try to break out of this cycle, recognizing that it does feel really hard at first. But usually once we take the first step, we send that Snapchat or reply to the text message, people get back to us and we start to feel more connected, and then it gets easier and more fun to build relationships and boost our mood. Well, we have to take small steps and set small goals for ourselves. So if this is tough for you, maybe start by reaching out to one friend tomorrow. Send a quick and basic, hey, how are you doing? Text. Then move on to reaching out to someone else and maybe share something interesting or funny that you saw online, and work your way up to FaceTime or video calls or group chats if those feel harder for you. And for some people, it may actually help to schedule in a time or set a reminder on your phone to reach out to people if you need that extra push, if you've gotten pretty used to that sort of staying more isolated place. Also, of course, important to find a private or quiet space. If that's hard in your house, then you can go outside, take a walk. And sometimes it can help to brainstorm conversation topics or activity ideas ahead of time. It can boost your confidence and make sure you have a few things top of mind you can talk about or ask your friends about.
Right, so building off some of those ideas that Dr. Hoffman shared, I wanted to give you some tips and ideas around staying connected. So let's start with connecting with the people that you're maybe living with right now. Meal times are a great time to connect. Sitting down at a table, no phones, no electronics, eating a meal together, and talking about how your day's been, how you're feeling, those sort of things. Now, I think sometimes people are like, that can get kind of boring. So in that case, trying to add some fun interactions. It might be playing games together, and you can see a range of different game ideas shown on the slide here, from board game, card games, and puzzles, having a family karaoke session, maybe doing an art and craft activity together. It might be cooking a meal together, so having some fun together, doing an activity together. Also getting out and exercising together. So it might be going for a walk, with your brother or sister or mum or dad, going for a bike ride, obviously keeping social distancing, recommendations in mind, and also with personal protective equipment. But getting outside, getting some fresh air and sunshine, hopefully, and being physically active really can help boost your mood and combat some of that tiredness and blah feeling that a lot of people are kind of experiencing at the moment. And having open, honest discussions with family members, what's going on at the moment, how they're feeling about it, offering each other support, and asking for help when you need it as well. So those ideas may work well in terms of the people you're living with, but we also want to think about how are you staying socially connected with friends and others that you don't live with. And this is where, online platforms are so incredibly helpful. So in the case of video chat, you can see there's a number of different platforms there, and each of these kind of cater for different age groups. Some of them have some really fun features. So if you do a FaceTime call, you might even create your own Animoji or Memoji character. So it kind of, puts a filter over your face and animates it, which is a lot of fun. House parties are a really common platform that's being used by a lot of teenagers and also family members. And it has some built-in games, which can be fun as well. So there's a range of different video chat platforms to choose from. There's also messaging, platforms, email, phone call, and social media posts. So when it comes to these different ways of staying connected online, I think it's important to reflect on two key things. One is, who are you reaching out to? So if you're reaching out to a grandparent, for example, who's not very tech savvy, picking up the phone and having a chat may be the best option in terms of them feeling connected. Video chat may not be an option, but at least they can hear your voice and you can hear theirs. So the first thing is, thinking about who you're connecting with, which of these platforms best suits them, also the age of the person. Secondly is like, what's the purpose of the communication? Is it to connect with someone, to share a conversation, to share a fun activity, or is it maybe to share a message more broadly? So if there's, a really interesting fact you found online related to COVID, for example, a social media post may be a more appropriate method of reaching out and sharing that.
So, of all of the times for this pandemic to happen, I, for one, feel grateful that it's 2020 and we have the internet and so many creative ways to connect online. So there are some ideas here. Some are some basic things that you might already be doing in person, or you might have done in person. So you could have a book club, read the same book and connect once a month with some friends to discuss. You could do the same thing with a movie or a TV show. There are lots, if you like to go to, work out with your friends, there are lots of online workout classes you can stream over Zoom and do together. There's yoga classes as well. You could get on the tie-dye trend or do a different art project together over FaceTime or Zoom. Same thing with cooking. And the idea is really to find activities that you might otherwise do together in person and see if you can get creative and do them together virtually. There are also a lot of virtual games out there. Jackbox Games is one program that is pretty popular right now that has a lot of trivia, drawing, or other silly games that you can connect with family or friends. There are also online trivia sites where you can join with one or two friends and play against other teams. You can play board games or poker online. There's really a lot out there if you're looking for it. Netflix Party is one of the first things that I think came out, which allows you to actually watch a show or a movie on Netflix with a friend or a group of friends and chat about it as you watch. There is also a site, it's called Game Night. It was called Game Night Out. They now have something called Game Night In, which is where you can get a group of friends or family members together for a game night, and a host actually comes in and leads everyone in some competitive games. If anyone is a fan of escape rooms that we used to do in person, you're in luck because they are now virtual. You can now do a virtual escape room. This is just one example, but there are many that are out there where you work together with your group of people to figure out the clues and escape the room. And a last one here is another program or a game called Alone Together. This is for two people where you have to work together to figure out the clues and solve the puzzles together. So doing an activity like some of the ones I mentioned is one way to facilitate deeper connections with friends or family members. So it gives some context for your conversation. We're used to having shared experiences and discussing them with each other. So it's important to find ways to continue to do that through this time. Activities also facilitate relationship development and help to create fun memories during this otherwise really tough time. It's also important to be real and honest about how you're doing. So let's break out of the I'm good, how are you? I'm good, how are you? Stuff that doesn't help us feel really connected. So if you're feeling tired, or if you're worried about what's to come, or you're annoyed at a family member, share that. Talk about it. Maybe your friend is feeling the same way that you are. Of course, we need to choose those people wisely. Make sure they're people you trust and not necessarily new friends or people you work with or things like that. And lastly, it's important to genuinely ask others how they're doing. This is a hard time, and your friends might really appreciate you checking in and asking how things are going in a real way. So sometimes we want to make new connections as well. So maybe you're not feeling so great about your current friends, or you're looking to meet some new people. There's lots of options out there to make some new connections during this time. Meetup.com is one site where you can join groups according to your particular interests. So you could join a club for people who are into photography or the same kind of movies that you are, or technology or video games. connect with other people who share similar interests and maybe do one of these online activities together. There are also online book clubs. So the Quarantine Book Club is a pretty cool one where they actually host video calls with some popular authors to discuss the book when you join. And there are lots of others as well. You can also stream a class and connect with others who are doing so at the same time. Exercise or dance classes, art classes, cooking classes as well. The last thing is coursehorse.com is a site where there are a lot of different classes. Some are more serious, like learning how to code or getting a certificate in a particular graphic design program. But lots of others are just fun, like donut making or watercolor. And it's another way to try something new that might be fun and connect with other people who are trying to do the same thing.
All right, sorry about that. I had a little internet outage then. I'm back. So now we'd like to move on to some tips for connecting. There's some really awesome ideas that about creative ways and fun ways of connecting with people online, meeting new people, but then it comes down to the practicalities. And so hopefully some of these tips are helpful in addressing those. So let's start with tips for video chats. So importantly, you want to check it's a good time and place to talk and that the tech is working. So ideally, you want to be in a place where you're not being distracted by other people, where it's not noisy. You may send a quick message to a friend, hey, is now a good time to chat? Particularly if you're going to be doing video calls, it's good to kind of set those up ahead of time. And you want to be polite, punctual, and engaging. So you want to make sure if there's a set time that you've agreed to do, maybe a group chat or a chat with one friend, that you're on time, that you're not running late. If it's not possible to do it in a quiet place, maybe you try and use your earphones as a way of blocking out background noise. Be careful of what's in your background, okay? There may be certain things you don't want everyone else seeing. So just be aware of, hey, what can they see behind me during this video call? Also, it's really annoying if you have a bright light behind you. So just checking, are there any sort of lights? I know, for example, at the moment, I have a really bright light behind me, but I've tried to adjust the height of my computer to kind of prevent that from being annoying for other people seeing it. If others are nearby and joking around and what have you, you might just say, hey, I've got a quick video call. Would it be okay if you can just be quiet if you're not able to go to another room, if you're all in sort of a small space and there's nowhere to go that is quiet? And then checking the technology is working. So, if you're using a microphone and speakers, just check that the microphone and speakers are working before the call. If you're using headphones, again, just check that that's working, that internet coverage seems to be going okay, or if your audio is via phone, that all those things are working. So you're not annoying the other person going, oh, hang on, I need to make sure that, my mic's not working, or I need to check my speakers, I can't hear you. You want it to be a fun, engaging experience if possible. So those things really detract from that. Ideally, you want to be sitting in front of the camera so the other person can see your head, chest, shoulders, and hands through the camera. So a lot of our communication is through gesture and movement. So if they're only able to see this part of your head, they're missing out on a lot of that communication, which can be really engaging as well. And just checking in at the beginning of the call, hey, can everyone see and hear me okay? So those issues can be addressed early on if need be. Now, a very important tip that I think can be really hard to follow through with, particularly if you're doing calls late in the day, you've already been online a lot, you're kind of a bit over it, but you want to stay focused on talking to the person or people that you're connecting with. So don't have other applications open in the background. Don't be talking to them whilst you're also sort of checking your phone and messaging. You want to give that person your total focus and attention, just like you would in face-to-face interactions. You've probably heard the tip, don't be always on your phone if you're connecting with someone face-to-face for a coffee or something. So it's the same with online. And people can tell. You might think that you're getting away with looking at, that page on Amazon or that YouTube clip in the background without them knowing, but you generally tell that you're not looking in the camera, you're distracted, they may see movements of your hand. So try and stay focused. You can do those things afterwards. But there's some tips for making that deeper connection and for setting up these interactions so they are as fun and engaging as they can be. So now let's switch to messaging online. So here's some tips to kind of set that up for success. Firstly, you don't always want to be the first to message others. So if you're always the one reaching out going, hey, how you going? Is everything okay? What's happening? Friendships and relationships are typically two-way streets. So you want the other person at least some of the time to be doing that reaching out. If they're not, it maybe suggests that, they're not as invested in trying to keep that communication open and staying connected during this time as what you are. Also trying to match your message length to theirs. So if they write back, hey, I'm doing well, how are you? You don't want to write an essay in response to that, okay? It's a little bit like, whoa, that's too much. So you want to be trying to kind of match how long your messages are to about how long theirs are, because that gives you a gauge of sort of how the conversation is going to flow. Also being aware of how long you take to write back or respond. So if they don't get back to you until the next day, you don't want to be writing back, watching little dots on your screen and then texting immediately when their message lands. It's just, it's a bit too eager. It's a bit too much, unless of course it's an emergency. So you want to be kind of matching the time you take to write back to how long they take to write back. Similarly, if you've sent one message, wait for the person to reply before sending a follow-up message. Don't send like a rapid fire, one question and then another statement and then another question. Again, it's overwhelming. So generally, just like you would in a face-to-face conversation, there's turn-taking involved, and it's the same with messaging. And similarly with the language that you use. So, if they're mainly sending you GIFs or, emojis or images as opposed to text, then it's often a good idea to try and do the same in response. If you're going to be really formal in how you speak to them and they're using, LOL and other abbreviations and acronyms, there's kind of like this mismatch and it's hard to connect because you guys sort of aren't on the same page with how you're communicating. And also being careful with jokes. So, humor, a lot of humor is in our facial expression, in our voice tone. So what may be obviously a joke, if delivered, even on a video call or face-to-face, may be lost in translation if you're messaging. So they may not be aware that, oh, that was a joke. The person may be easily offended and think that you're being serious or you're saying something offensive when you were just trying to joke around. So you just want to be a little bit careful that it's very clear if you are going to make a joke that the intention is you're not trying to hurt or offend the person in any way. The other question that, came in ahead of tonight's webinar was, like, how much messaging should you be doing? Like, how many messages are enough? How much messaging is too much? And, I think it's important to be aware of what your daily schedule looks like. So, if you're studying for finals at the moment, for example, for college, you want to be focused on study and classes during study and class time. Or if, you're sitting an online exam, that's where your focus needs to be. So it's important you don't feel you have to be responding straight away. You can get get to the message and respond when you have the opportunity to. And if you know you're going to be busy for, say, 2 or 3 days, you can even give a shout out to maybe close friends or people who may be connecting with you during that time and say, hey guys, really busy studying for the next 2 or 3 days. Sorry if I'm a bit delayed in responding to messages. I'll get in touch with you, after Thursday. So expectation management's important. At the moment, there's a huge variation in how busy people are. Some people, who have lost their jobs, who aren't studying, have lots of time to be sending lots of messages and, links to funny YouTube clips. Others are still busy with commitments of, online learning, work commitments remotely. So, you just want to make sure people are aware, communicate what your availability looks like so they have realistic expectations around when you can get back to them and also how much time you've got available to be messaging back and forth. Because if people understand that, they're less likely to get offended or upset if you are delayed in responding. So I also wanted to share some safety tips around online communication. Some of these you may already be very familiar with, but I thought it might be helpful just to recap briefly. So the first one is obviously not sharing your usernames or passwords with others. You don't want them hacking into your account, and that can be really hard to kind of navigate. Often you have to shut down the account and create a new one if someone does hack your username or password. Also, being very cautious around who you're messaging or chatting with online. So generally only messaging and chatting with people you know. If you're part of a group chat, like on House Party, for example, you want to make sure that you know at least one of the people in that group as a general guideline. And, if you're noticing anyone saying or doing things that seem a little bit off, then maybe you can ask that person offline, hey, do you know this person? What was going on there? Just kind of, be tuned in to things that seem unusual if you don't know the person. And then very importantly, don't share personal information, images, or pictures online. Obviously, everything's traceable and could be shared. So anything that's private, you don't want to be sharing online as it could be, broadly distributed. The other important tip is being yourself. So if you are, joining one of the kind of groups, like meetup groups that Dr. Hoffman mentioned, don't pretend that you're really interested in something if you're not. I was speaking recently with a young adult that I work with, and that all his friends are mad keen with basketball, and they were talking about the Michael Jordan series that was airing, and they're all into it, and like he was kind of pretending that he was into it too, even though he hadn't seen it. And, that can really get you into trouble. You want to be genuine and authentic online, just like you would be face to face. So it's okay to go, oh, I haven't seen it. What's it about in that situation? You don't have to pretend that you have the same interests or that you've seen something that you haven't to connect with others. People often love that feeling of them being the expert and them getting to share information with you because they know something that maybe you don't. So be genuine, be yourself. I also wanted to share some tips and ideas around preventing and managing arguments. This is a really stressful time, and it's natural to have a range of mixed and strong emotions. So there may be some dimensions of the current COVID situation that you're really excited about. So I know some people I've been talking to are like, they're loving sleeping in. They're loving not having as early start because they don't have to do the morning commute. But then they're really sad because some of the plans they had for summer have, unfortunately don't look like they're going to go ahead. For many college students, it's a really tough transition to maybe being back home, living with your parents, feeling like they're possibly treating you like they did back when you were a teenager, and feeling like, hey, what happened to all that amazing independence that I had and that I was excited about, that now it feels like there's been some steps backwards. So, all of these mixed emotions, and everyone in a household is feeling these mixed emotions about a range of different areas in their life. So in that sort of emotionally intense environment, conflict and arguments, it's really easy for those to happen. So it's about being very mindful and thoughtful about how can you set things up to prevent that from happening in the first place, and then managing it in the best possible way if arguments do happen. So my first tip around this is really limiting the amount of time that you're all together. So certainly having your own me time, and whether that be engaging in online learning, doing other fun activities that you really enjoy. But, the time you spend together, if possible, needs to be about quality, not quantity. So limiting the amount of time, I know particularly where there's siblings and arguing around that, it's like, okay, well, how about you guys do your own thing for most of the day, and then have a set time when you hang out, maybe watch something together online, or, do some of those other activities we spoke about earlier. So me time is really important, so that you've got your own space, you've got time to manage your own emotions, get yourself in as good a space as you can before you are coming together and hanging out together as a family. Also setting some ground rules as a family around, how we're going to treat each other, recognizing we're all going to have tough days and tough moments, but how can we set this up so we can get along as well as we can? So having a family rule like, hey, we all need to kind of use friendly face, voice, words, and actions. And we have the right to call each other out if we notice we're not doing that, but that's going to be our goal. And everyone's going to try and do that so that we can get along as well as possible. Also recognizing that on some issues, we're talking, you guys are young adults, you've got your own opinions on topics, and they may not always be the same as your parents. They may not be the same as siblings or other people who are living with you. So it's okay to disagree, to agree to disagree on certain issues. You can have different viewpoints, respect that you think about things differently, and they may be topics that you kind of don't revisit so often because you know that they're a trigger point for arguing. So, okay, I get that, that's how you feel about this, that's what you think, and then redirecting to a different topic or a different activity. Now, if there are issues that you feel you do need to raise or address, then there are some key points that kind of help that process to go well, for the other person to listen and hopefully follow through with what you're requesting. So the first tip around raising an issue with someone is trying to do it at a time when everyone's calm and not time pressured. So, if your mum's about to jump on a work meeting, a work Zoom meeting, that's not the time to raise an issue with her. She's likely to be short-tempered and not responsive to what you're saying. Also, try and keep the discussion based on facts rather than making judgments or overgeneralizations. So typically, if you're raising an issue, using words like always or never can be trigger points for the other person. So try and stick to the facts. And then owning how you feel with kind of what we call an I statement. So using a sort of template or formula along the lines of I feel, because, and can you please, whatever you want them to do differently. So I've put an example here on the slide. So I feel frustrated because you're not wearing a mask when you go out or washing your hands when you get home. Based on what the CDC says, this is putting us all at risk. Can you please make more of an effort to wear your mask and wash your hands? So you can see in that example, owning your own feelings, sticking to the facts, and then clearly stating in a polite way what you'd like the person to do differently. Now, in terms of how you're going to respond to what they say, you want to listen to what they've got to say without interrupting and try and acknowledge their viewpoint. Okay, I understand that you feel that, we're all going to get COVID anyway, but I'd really appreciate if we can take the steps we can to prevent it, as an example. Now, if things are starting to escalate and, you're noticing people are getting tense, the anger levels are rising, it's often a good idea to kind of call a timeout, say, hey, let's just take a break. I think we're all getting pretty frustrated right now. Let's take a break. When we're feeling calmer, we can regroup and try and figure out a solution to this. So continuing to try and argue your viewpoint when you notice you're getting really upset and others are getting upset rarely ends in a good space. That's when you can potentially say or do things you really regret, and the other person may get super defensive and not be willing to revisit the issue in the future. All right, so we've covered the main points for tonight's webinar at this point. So what we'd love for you to do is to reflect on the different ideas and topics that we've presented and think about how can you take some of these ideas and put them into action in your own life. So takeaways. The first thing that we'd like you to do is think about what's one fun way that you can connect with people at home or online, based on some of the ideas we shared, or maybe some ideas that you've had during this webinar based on the discussion that was had. Then we'd love for you to think about what's one way you can try to connect with new people. So it might be through, for example, CourseHorse or Meetup, trying a new activity. And then what's one thing you can do to prevent arguments with others, whether that be with the people that you're living with or arguments with others online.
So we are ready to take questions. It doesn't look like any have come through yet, but we do have a couple of minutes, so maybe we'll give people a minute or so to write in if you have any questions or any things that we have not addressed, and we will try to address them before we wrap up. So this is a great question. Looks like we have one that has come in about how can you help your young adult stay connected when she or he is just not interested? I think a lot of parents are struggling with this right now. Renee, do you have thoughts, or you want me to take this?
Well, I can share my initial thoughts so that I'll hand it over to you. I think, one of the ways to encourage young adults to connect is around existing interests. So, if they're really keen gamers, for example, it might be, hey, is there some online gaming group related to what you're into that you may be able to connect with others? It may even be instructional in the first instance, where they feel like they're learning new skills and the contact's somewhat incidental. And then, from there, it may be, oh, there's key people they connect with. Then they might be willing to take the step of maybe joining a meetup group, for example, that relates to that particular game or gaming in general. So similar to what Dr. Hoffman mentioned, like taking small steps. Initially, it may just be some incidental online contact where they're learning and in some sort of, online learning or instructional platform to learn how to do something they're really excited about well. And then it might be taking from there the next step of, well, could you join some sort of social group where others are kind of talking more informally, or, maybe spend some time doing a more formal activity where they're gaming together, but then some time where they're kind of just talking more informally. So I think the key thing around where they're not interested is, what are they into? How can we use that as a platform to broaden their social connectedness?
Yeah, I agree. And I love that, picking up on starting with what they're already doing or what they're already interested in, trying to build from there. I think also to the point around preventing and managing conflict, I think it's tough, and it's important to find the balance between reminding and encouraging your young adult to reach out and stay connected, and also sort of giving them space to manage their lives on their own. Now, that doesn't mean that you should give up altogether and not encourage them, because they may need that push, or they may need you to say, oh, hey, I found this. Did you know you could do an escape room online? Like, I wonder if so-and-so might be interested in that. Sort of planting some of those ideas. but then sort of backing off for a day or two before going back into it, so that the young adult doesn't feel overwhelmed or get too annoyed to the point where they just shut you out completely. See if we have any other questions. Looks like no other questions have come through, and we are about at our time. So Skylar can go to the next one. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And we want to just let you know about our upcoming webinars. So on Thursday, the 21st, for parents, we have Helping Your Young Adult Navigate Abrupt Transitions. And then next Monday on the 25th, for teens or young adults, Dealing with Anxious or Unwanted Thoughts. And we would also just a quick reminder to please fill out the survey that you will get at the end of this to help give us some feedback. But otherwise, we really appreciate all of you taking the time with us, and hope that you all stay well and take care and do some fun activities.
Thanks so much.